Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined alongside my co-host Jeff, as always. Jeff and I are writers and directors and passionate about the art of storytelling. Filmmaker Mixer is a creative hub where aspiring and established filmmakers come together to share experiences, insights, strategies, and inspiration.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, software for all of your production needs. Stay tuned for more information later in the show. Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, and today we are chatting with Liz Toonkel. Liz is a production designer, and her credits range from, everything from this new thriller Skincare, which is an amazing film with Elizabeth Banks, all the way to the animated, I guess it's live action and mix of animation, the film Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which is another lovely film. So, Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Well, I want to jump into, and it's great meeting you as well. I want to jump into the creative process in a little bit and how you use production design to further the story and create the world. But first, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into this crazy business, and how did you focus in on production design?
Sure. Well, I've always been like a lover of the arts, and I feel like I've never really been able to be in any other realm. Even as a kid, I was always highly creative, and that led me to do many different things. Like I was very into dance and musical theater and fashion design and as a child, and so I saw like many different ways to kind of or many different paths I could pursue. But I think I got excited about pursuing working in film because it felt like it kind of encompasses so many different art forms. So I went to NYU for film making for college, and while I was there, I wrote and directed a lot of my own films, but I also realized, like when I first came to school, I knew I wanted to direct, but I was also like, oh, maybe I want to be a cinematographer. Like I love composition and the way things are shot. And I think as I spent time there, I was like, I think what I actually am more interested in is production design. But it's one of those things that many people, even like people that know about filmmaking, don't really understand. So I think it took me a long time to really understand what that meant. And so when I finished school, I kind of needed to get a job. And
As happens with life.
no one was banging down my door to direct things. So I was like, maybe I should really look at pursuing this as a career path. And so I started just sort of taking whatever jobs and internships I could find in New York in film, in the art department, and then quickly realized that like if it was something I really wanted to do at a high level, that I needed more skills and knowledge about it. So I ended up going back to grad school at Cal Arts, where I studied scenic design and studio art, and sort of continued to both make my own work and like develop my design practice. And then ever since completing that program, I've kind of continued to do the same, where I still make my own work, but I collaborate with other people on their films and then on commercials and experiential events. And it's a way that I can like pay my bills and, support myself, but it also is really exciting to me to collaborate on different kinds of projects, and especially like stories that speak to me. So that's a little bit about me and how I got to where I am.
Well, I'm curious, when you talk about collaboration and coming up with the look of a film, when we talk to actors, one of the things that comes up a lot is when you're reading a screenplay for the first or second time, do you have a process to break down a character and create that performance? I want to ask that to you in the realm of production design. Do you have a specific process when you're reading a script that informs you on how to break down the look of the film? And this is maybe before you start collaborating with the director or the producer or writer. I'm curious what that process is like.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's an insightful question. Um, Definitely. I mean, I think for me, I do think I both through maybe some natural skill and also a lot of education and work on it. Like it's very easy for me when I get a piece of text to kind of quickly envision something. Um, and so usually when I'm reading it, like it's pretty, something is built in my mind quite quickly of what this might be, who these people are, and like also certain things within the text that I'm like, oh, there's, like I was just speaking with the director yesterday who has something with these masks and at the end of his movie. And I was like, well, I feel like if that's a motif, I want to see it throughout
Oh,
the
interesting.
whole thing. So I kind of, and I think a lot of that I do give credit to, um, having a lot of training in terms of theatrical design for the theater, because that's so much about space over time and how things change and really making sure that there's a strong difference from the beginning to the end. So I think very narratively about the design.
I'm curious about something. When you say a difference from the beginning to the end, and I've never heard that before in terms of production design, but it makes a lot of sense. So are you saying you're looking for an arc for the design as well? Oh, that's
A hundred
cool.
percent. Yeah,
That's
no, I
really
think
interesting.
that's like imperative for me. Um, and I think, I mean, it's just like a good screenplay has to have the same thing, is like you're at the same place at the end, but it feels totally different. And so it's like, how do I help support that? So I think for me, I always am just starting with like, who are these people? Where are they at and where are they going to end up? And then like also as we move throughout that, what else are we touching upon? Um, so that's just sort of in my head. And I think like my initial, usually like before I even meet a director, I'm putting together, I mean, sometimes I'd rather talk to them first, but there is a lot of pressure in our industry to like show up to these first meetings with all this stuff. So sometimes I fall prey to that. But usually the first thing I put together is sort of like from a very real place, because I'm very interested, even if I'm doing something more fantastical, of like what is the relationship of this to our real world? Like who is this person? What is their, bathroom look like, at the end of the day? Like what are the things that they would have collected over time? Or like what are the building blocks of their space that we can kind of exploit for different reasons? So that's sort of where I start. I think different people have different ways they go about it, but for me, that's sort of the most inspirational because I love to like find an exciting real detail from like a real photograph of someone's real living room and be like, ooh, how do we extrude that and do something with that? And then I think from there, I get more interested in things like color or like other movies and like cinematic references. But I think for me, I really start from a place of like, what is like the real life comp to what we're doing? Like, who is the person closest to this person that I could like excavate and like steal details from?
And are you talking about like famous people or personal people you have
No, no,
relationships with
I'm
or
usually looking for like, like I really try and stay away from like glossy images.
yeah.
Like I'm trying to find someone's like candid snapshot of like their living room.
And where do you get inspiration for that? I'm curious.
You mean like where do I actually find the
Yeah,
images?
yeah.
Oh, I don't want to give away all my secrets. But I mean, I love to look through like photojournalism. Um, like I oftentimes like if I get a script, like I'll try and find articles in different publications where they're shooting real photos of people that are going through something like the character in the story or living in similar spaces. And then there are certain, rabbit holes online I go down to find real photos.
That's
But
interesting.
but I'm really, like for instance on skincare, it was a little bit different because of, you know, a character like Elizabeth Banks's character who is living in more of this like interior designed world. Like her character, I did a lot of research in like Architectural Digest and Dwell and things like that. But most of the time that's not my starting place. Or even for that, it wasn't my starting place, but it was important to like definitely look at those things. But for other projects I do, I never look at stuff like that. Like I want to look at, I should never say never, but that's not my focus. My focus is really like what is a real person space look like. And that's hard to find. It takes a lot of work to find because with the internet, so much of it, or and definitely pre-internet when it's, was only like magazines and things like that. People are usually highlighting, you know, really beautiful spaces and
Right,
curated
right.
spaces, or even if they're like a young kid showing their apartment in New York, they're usually showing you one view of it. But I want to see like what it looks like when it's not camera ready.
You're looking for the
Um,
street photographer, not the
yeah, yeah, the
yeah.
street photographer of interiors for
Interesting.
sure.
I find myself in line at the post office or at a coffee shop, and you hear an interesting phrase, and I'm like, I gotta write that down. That could be interesting dialogue. I picture you as a people watcher or observing things and seeing clothing or
Oh my
something that
God. No, my phone, my partner is always like making fun of me because like my phone is just full of, I'm like, go to someone's house or see something on the street and I'm taking like pictures of, a box, you know. But but yeah, I mean, that stuff's so exciting. And I think I love, I mean, to me, great movies really are or like get to humanity and like who we are as people and our experiences of being people. And so I think I'm really captivated by that. Not that I can't be captivated by something that's more fantastical but even the best versions of those stories, they're still real people at
right, right.
heart. And so yeah, I think that's another reason I like doing this is like my favorite thing in the world is just to talk to new people. Like I'm talking to you and like get to understand who people are. And um I think it's a really special thing, especially in like our current world where like we're so disconnected, through
We
digital means and
we've
AI and all these things. Like I like to me, the idea of like AI making art, I'm like, well, to me, that's not art because the beauty of art to me is that it's made by a person.
right,
Like, you know
right,
what I mean? Like all the art that I am most thrilled by is like because I get to get a sense of who the person is.
right.
So I want to bring that out in the spaces I design. And yeah.
Well, I'm curious about another thing. Ultimately, you're a storyteller. So I'm curious, how do you use production design? I don't know if you can give a specific example or maybe broad stroke it, but I'm curious how you use production design to serve the story and the arc of the story. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's like the thing that I think about that's like top of mind the whole time for me. And that's not for everyone. Like I had an interview with a director a couple months back and they were like, I want it to look really beautiful. I don't really, and I was like, great. Like I could do that, but just so you know, like my thing is the story. Like that's why I show up every day is like, how can I be in service of that? And I think it's sort of like your initial question, like when I'm initially reading the script, and then literally every time that I'm working, once I'm involved in a project, it's in service of the story. So what can I do? Like the locations we're picking or the sets we're building, whatever. How do these all add up in service of the storytelling? Like again, not that you can't have something that's like decorative and beautiful, but like that shouldn't be the fun. Like if something's going to be decorative and beautiful, it's because it's important to the narrative. Um, and so yeah, I think I mean I think I could talk ad nauseum about this, but I think it's just sort of like that's sort of my MO the entire time. And um
Let's jump over to skincare. Maybe that'd be a good
yeah,
example because
yeah.
I'm curious, when you're watching a movie, you're just taking in this world and you just think this is the world you're in, blah, 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 blah. But it's very carefully created. the world is created. And so you take something like Los Angeles and you've got to make it look both glamorous, but also kind of broken in a way. And talk me through the process of how you do that, if that even makes sense. And maybe it's all creative and intuitive and very nebulous. I don't know. There's probably a lot of intuition involved, but I'm just curious how you get that look because I thought the look of that film was really interesting, and it
Oh,
it sort of yeah, it bridges kind of multiple worlds actually in terms of mood and tone. So talk me through that if you can.
yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. That was definitely the goal. So I'm glad that you got that from it. Um, I think for me, like, as someone who's like lived in Los Angeles for a long time, there is this sort of experience of living here that is so different from the way it's portrayed in the media. And like, as someone who moved here, um, your expectation of it versus the reality. And I feel like that's such a big part of the story of skincare is sort of these characters who are in different relationship to kind of that dream of that Hollywood dream or uh this idea of like making it and success. Um and so I think that like Austin Peters, the director of the film, grew up in Los Angeles, and um, he had initially approached. We had actually worked together on a couple of like a commercial and a music video prior, but he had approached me about designing skincare because he saw Emily the Criminal, another film that I designed that kind of the goal of that was to really show this other side of Los Angeles and what it's like to not be someone who's successful here. Um, and he really liked that I kind of got at that side of the city. And he was like, I want you to bring that to this. Um, and I was like, great, I'd love to do it. But I think it also has to exist in contrast to this other version of LA. Like we have to kind of see them in juxtaposition. Um, and so I think I'm getting in the weeds in the
That's
answering
okay.
of your question, but um, so much of that or our process on working on skincare, what and in Emily the Criminal was like, how do we find these real places in LA that we're not usually seeing and like show them for what they are and then also contrast them with some of these other elements that we're bringing in. I don't know if I answered the
No, no, no,
question.
that's good. So, well, I'm really curious about the collaboration. So, are you involved in location scouts then in that respect, or
Yes,
okay?
yes, that's a huge part of my job. And like, I think, you know, especially on very location heavy films, like I think it's a really important aspect. I mean, it's locations are a huge part of production design. They're like the meat and bones of it, especially if you're not building everything. And so on both Emily the Criminal and Skincare, we like work tirelessly to find the right places to shoot and like would just not give up trying to get them to shoot at. Um, which is also really time consuming. Like I've had other people like come approach me about doing, being like, "Oh, I love your work on this film. Like, can you do this for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but just so you know, like this was months and months. Like before we even were technically in pre-production working on finding these locations because it's so challenging. It's a very challenging city to shoot in. That's why people don't shoot here, just because it's really expensive and um yeah, so location scouting is like a huge part of what I do. And I was really fortunate that on skincare, we had an incredible location manager, Mike Percival, who like had a really great eye and was also really invested. And so he like what will often happen is we'll be like, okay, we need a house. And then I'll put together kind of images of like, I think it's this kind of house. And then he'll go out and find them. And he always was able to go out and find something. Not that there wouldn't be a lot of work involved after, but that really was the right spirit. Um, and it was a really lovely experience working with him.
And I'm also curious about DPs and cinematographers. I was talking to a DP at the Austin Film Festival, and he was saying that the favorite person for him to work with is the production designer
Oh,
because
that's
they sort of,
nice.
yeah, I thought that was interesting. He said, if I have a great production designer, half my work is done because, you know, so I'm curious, when you're working with a DP, are you able to, do you guys talk like color palette? Do you talk, I mean, do you have that collaboration? I guess it depends on the film, but I'm curious what that process is like.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like dreamy when you work with someone who you collaborate well with. Like the DP on skincare is just like the biggest gem of a human being ever, and so talented, but also so kind. Um and and that's Christopher Ripley is his name. And yeah, we were really lucky like on this project. First off, like I feel like Austin put together a great team. So like from the beginning, we were just sort of on the same page, but we were really there to support each other because it's so important to do that because you like if you're not getting along, you can't you're both gonna fail, you know? So it's like I think that that's what you realize as you gain more experience in doing this is just like how those relationships are the most important thing. But yes, so like on skincare, we spent a lot of time talking about the color palette, about the look of different spaces, about the feeling that we were trying to evoke. Um, and like it was super fun on this movie because like oftentimes a lot of DPs are very anti-shooting like mirrors or glass, like they because they cause problems. And every time I was like for instance, Hope Goldman's skincare studio, like I wanted to have a lot of mirror, and he was like, fine, like throw it at me, or like, and so I think it makes it such a better product when people are willing to like go a little bit further and do those things that like might make things harder for them, but in the end make the product so much better.
Well, I'm glad you brought up mirrors because I wanted to ask this, and I apologize if I'm getting too much in the weeds, but I'm also curious how themes inform you as a production designer. And obviously, skincare is about beauty and self-image and how people see themselves, whether it's an accurate way they view themselves or not. I mean, does that get into your brain when you're coming up with a design? Because obviously, it must have with the mirror, the whole mirror thing. I'm curious.
Definitely. I mean, I think like again, that's what I'm thinking about the whole time and like what elements can we bring in that can like help just bring those ideas out in the space so like you feel them. Um so definitely yeah, that was like a lot of what we thought about for Hope's studio and then also like Jordan's like apartment. I had this idea that he had like a gym in it and I love the like my freshman year roommate in college was a model and she tacked up like around our full-length mirror all these cutouts from magazines as like thin inspiration of like skinny women. And I was like, what if he has all of these like, muscular men on the wall around him while he's working out? Um, yeah, so I definitely think a lot about that stuff, and I think it really informs like when we choose locations too, because sometimes like in the script you might have, this scene takes place at a hot dog stand or whatever, but when you actually like start looking, you're like, oh wow, there's this amazing, pierogi place that actually, maybe that ties into this thing. And so I think that like the more you kind of let the story lead you, the more special surprises you can kind of find and realize, oh, you can actually like make it even better than it was on the page.
That's interesting. I'm curious about another thing. We talk a lot about what we call happy accidents, and I'm curious if that's happened with you in the production design world, where, let's say, you're shooting and suddenly it snows, and you've got to rewrite the script to make sure that you can use that scene that you're shooting in the snow when you haven't been shooting in the snow for the previous week or something like that. And then it ends up being better because you have this production value, this great snow, coming and going and so forth. Um, has that ever happened? Do you have a story like that where
Oh, well, in
last minute changes? Yeah,
skincare,
yeah, go
there's
ahead.
one scene where it's raining. And it was just, it never rains in Los Angeles. And it just kind of happened. And it was like kind of disastrous because, like, Elizabeth was wearing this really expensive rented fur and we didn't have an umbrella and all these things. But then when you watch the film, it looks so good. Um, uh, I mean, I think that stuff's happening all the time. I mean, I think that's what's sort of amazing and challenging about filmmaking is it's just you're doing something so hard and so vast that
And so many
like
moving parts.
there's just constantly going to be things that you're not expecting. Um, and so I really do think like as of my job as like being like a professional creative problem solver. Like I think more than I mean it's many things, but I think that that's the most important aspect of it is like, can you solve basically any problem? Because they're all going to happen. I did once have this mentor who told me that there are no happy accidents, that uh, things work out because you were prepared for them.
Interesting.
And on one hand, at the time, I was like, that's kind of egotistical, but I do actually see the point in it. And I think as I get better at what I do, I see the truth in that of like, oh, I knew like for instance, I worked on a comedy special a month or two ago. And there was one thing they were like, oh, yeah, we don't need that. And then on the day, the talent was like, oh, can I have this thing? And I was like, yeah, I have it. I have it anyway. You know what I mean? Because like I know at this point, like I always have to have 50 extra things or so. So I do think there is some truth in that, that like if you're kind of, you prepare yourself and you also learn, which I'm always learning to get better at, but like you kind of learn to be more flexible and rolling with it that you can kind of make lemonade all the time.
Well, that's interesting because you make a great point that I've never really thought about before, but it makes perfect sense that one of the skill sets of a filmmaker, you have to be prepared to always think on your feet. And that's just a skill set that you should have. That's interesting. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's something that, a lot of young filmmakers don't realize. Like, I feel like a lot of times if I'm talking or when I was starting out or if I talk to newer filmmakers, they'll be like I think yeah, just they feel like they have to have everything figured out ahead of time and also like in a very inflexible way. And I do think that there's value to like knowing what you want, but I think also like I mean, I always say it's like making a movie is like going into battle. So like you have to just the most important thing is that you feel like the people standing next to you have your back because you can't plan for any of the stuff that's going to happen. Like you can have, plan Bs and solutions, but like especially like the emotional effect of some of those things you can't be totally prepared for. So the all you can really do is build strong relationships with the people with you. And I think that that's a really hard thing to learn. And uncomfortable, like I think filmmaking is very hard. It's like a very hard career path in quotes. And like, you know, I've made many mistakes out throughout my career, like especially when I was starting out and even till today, like I'm far from perfect, but you do the best you can and you
right.
and you like try to set yourself up for success, but you have to be prepared for a lot of failure.
Well, you're also in filmmaking, as much planning and prep and everything you do, you're also making the film that you're making that day, if that makes sense.
For
Um,
sure.
because when it comes down to, rolling the cameras and you're there and things are gonna shift and change and move, and you just have to move with it. But I'm curious about another thing. Um, Actors sometimes when they're trying to figure out a scene or the emotion of the scene or something, some business, let's say, um, they like to do stuff. So do you work with the actors? They come to you and say, "Hey, I really, I need this or I need that." Maybe it's not called for in the
Yeah.
script, but it's something they're looking for. What's that
Oh, for
process like?
sure. I mean, I think about that a lot. I think because of sort of like my theatrical training, and then I make my own kind of solo performance. Like I have like a one woman magic show I've
Oh,
been
that's cool.
touring. Yeah. And so I feel like I'm aware of like some of the things that people need to perform. And so I think about those things when I'm working on material. And probably more than a lot of designers, I'm like kind of obsessive about the props and like what those are. And I get really excited about having suggestions, and that's usually something that, I'd go to the director and I'd say, hey, what if he had this thing in this scene? Or like, could we have that as an option in case, that actor's interested, and see if they like the idea. And then if they do, a lot of times when you're working with bigger talent, like they want to come in and they want to see all the props beforehand and like kind of get a sense of what you're building for them. And then I'll kind of throw it out there and be like, hey, I had this idea about if you have, a cigarette in this scene or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. And it's exciting when if, if they like it or if they're all like, oh, wait, that makes me think of this. And then we think of something totally new. But it's definitely, an exciting aspect of it for me. And I like to have some extra goodies in case they want something.
And what's the motivation for those decisions? Is it like the scene is very tense and urgent and they want something to fit you? I mean, is there a specific reason or are they just looking for stuff that accents the character? I'm curious what drives those decisions on the props. I mean, not props that are
Yeah, I
called
mean,
out in the script, but
yeah, I
props
mean,
that,
for
yeah.
me, like sometimes, yeah, I guess it's sort of, we probably both have, I mean, sometimes I think there are certain actors that are very interested in props and like that really helps them is to have like an object or something they're doing. Um, I think for me that I feel like sometimes it really just like helps us get to know them better, and like grounds them in whatever space they're in.
You mean get to know the
Um,
character better? Is that what you mean? Or that,
yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
like
Interesting.
reveal something about them.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Well, before we wrap up, I'm curious if people want to follow your career and what you're working on. Do you have like websites or are you an Instagram
Yeah,
person?
yeah.
How do
I have
people?
two websites because I kind of have two paths in life. I have like one website that's all my design work and then one website that's all my own artwork. And in terms of coming up, I have some projects that will hopefully come out soon and that I can't really talk that much about. But and then, it's kind of a wild time in this business, but some projects that are slowly in the gonna get made. Um,
Well, what's your
and
website?
then my website is just my name, Liz, Toonkel.com. And then my art website is the same thing, Liz, Toonkel
Oh, nice.
studio.com.
What kind of art do you do?
Um, so I make solo performance mostly. So I have this one woman magic show, Magic for Animals, that I've been touring for the past few years. And then I also have been writing a feature that I want to
Oh, nice.
direct. Um, so that's what I've been putting my other time into it is writing this movie and touring my magic show.
Well, when is your magic show coming to Austin?
I hope soon. I would
You
love to do
should.
it there. Yeah, I'm doing it in New York, January 10th and 12th. I'm doing it during this theater conference that happens in New York every January. So those are sort of small shows, but if anyone listening wants to come and this comes out before then, But after that, I'm not totally sure my next steps. I've done it a lot of places, but we'll see what's next with it.
Well, that's cool. Well, Liz,
Yeah.
it's been wonderful chatting with you. This has been fun. I love talking with creative people. And
Yeah, I appreciate the depth of your questions.
oh no,
Yeah, it's
I
really
could
nice.
talk about this stuff all day, but yeah, circle back, if you get into pre-production with your feature or in post or any projects you're working on, our door is always open.
Oh,
You're
thank
welcome to
you.
jump on again and we can chat some more.
I would love that.
All
Well,
right.
thanks so much. Have a great day and happy listening.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, owned and operated by Stephanie Moore and Stephanie Harrison. We at Gemini Crown Tech have covered all your production management needs with our proprietary software. Please visit our website at www.geminicrowntech.com and use the code FMP for Filmmaker Mixer podcast listeners, so we know how you heard about us.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.